Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a Learning and Growing webinar, Zooming into Better Engagement. Our presenter today is Dr. Laura Garrett of Tulsa Community College. My name is Kelsey, and I am your moderator today for Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions as you go and we will get to them. I will now hand it over to our presenter.
Sorry about that. Kelsey, do I need to share the PowerPoint again, or is it up and running?
Yep, you'll have to share it again.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, just a little bit of my background. I have been in higher education for over 30 years. I began online teaching with correspondence courses, believe it or not. So I've been in this business for a long time. One of the things I may say that startles you about online education is how much I love it, and also how much I think it is an appropriate platform for a lot of our students. Students who struggle with other avenues may actually do better in a Zooming class or an online class than they do in a live classroom class. However, that means that we have to be careful that we are motivating and engaging and involving students in the process. So thanks to COVID, I began on the Zoom platform. So I have used what we called IETV, broadcasting out especially to dual enrollment students, high school students. One of my career paths engaged me in a place that had lots of rural schools out where really the only way they could access college classes is through an online platform. So my history with this is long, and of course, every time we go at this, we change. So one of the things that COVID did for me was to teach me a little more about best practices, and that's what I want to share with you today. Kelsey and I have talked, and if you all want to ask questions or get involved along the process, please do so. You're welcome to ask questions as we go along with the process. This is the Zooming generation. The Chronicle basically tells us that for the most part, there is no other generation than our current traditional students who are used to digital learning. They may or may not be positive about it, but my research on my Zoom classes would tell me that many of them really enjoy the platform and find it to be a very helpful part of the process. I work in the community college setting. But it's true in all of higher education that for the most part, we know that this is going to stay, that online education will happen regardless of whether we as faculty want it to or not. And so as a result, that means that some of us need to embrace these settings. But by the way, I think it's really important to note that a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today are also very good engagement tools inside the classroom. Or if you're flipping the classroom and you want to make sure that you're engaging students in the flip, these things work there too. I won't read this to you. There's tons of them out there, but I think it's really important as you start your semester to set the pace, to say, okay, here are the rules of the road, things that we really want you to do to make sure that all of us are respected and that we have an enriching environment. Okay, so the top 15 things that I've come up with, I'm of the David Letterman generation, so I love top 10s. And of course, once you start, it's hard to not have 15, so 20. One of the things that is very big for me is the backgrounds. And this is an example of me getting ready to teach a class. That's a Toy Story background. So every class period, I change my background. Again, seems simple, but students are very engaged in that. And oftentimes they send me backgrounds that they want me to use. Some of them I'm not really familiar with. And some, of course, I actually have my own children are traditional college age. So I know a lot of what they grew up with in their childhoods because I was raising children during that time frame. So I have lots of backgrounds that like Blue's Clues, for example, that they're very familiar with and fun. So there you go. There's my Blue's Clues, also popular media type situations. And these change. One of the things that I like to do too is I've taught intro to psychology now for 30 years. So sometimes I get bored. So some of these things engage me as well and get me more enthused about going in to the online setting. I'll tell you that my composite of students is cross-generational. Of course, those of you who know community colleges very well know I've got traditional college students, I have dual enrollment high school students, and of course I have adults returning to school. So I try to make sure that I'm engaging all of them at the same time. The beginning of the semester, one of my first assignments is for them to select videos that they send to me. We work in the Blackboard platform, but I'm very familiar with Canvas and the others. And so in the discussion boards, I ask them to find an inspirational video. Now, I teach psychology, so that works very nicely, but I think it works in any setting. And you have a couple of choices. You could have just plain old inspirational videos to open, or you could also get videos that fit with the platform that you use. So if you teach math, you might say, I want you to find a clip of a popular show or popular movie that has math in it in some capacity. I always make the discussion boards a race. So what that basically means is that you can't post a video that someone else has posted. There's two strategies behind that. The first is it gets them to post quicker. And the second is it gets them to watch their other videos. So in that light, then it creates more enthusiasm, more excitement in posting in discussion boards. I also open the classes with these videos. So every class period, I start with one of their videos. Couple of reasons for that. One is they like to watch to see when I use it. I always engage in 5 minutes or less, appropriate and fitting the topic that I have. But it also gives me some grace in allowing students to pop in and out a little bit late for class. So if somebody's having trouble or they're driving to their internet or whatever happens, then that gives me the first 5 minutes to A, engage, set the pace, get the excitement going, and B, give time for those people who tend to fall in place a little late. I did just attend a seminar on Flip, I think it's called, and it's not flipping the classroom, but it's a great higher education tool to allow discussion boards to be videos instead of discussion posts. And I'm excited about that. I don't know much about it, but I'm sure there are other platforms out there that would allow you to be able to put videos in. Sometimes I start with them posting 2 truths and a lie. Y'all know about this. It's an introduction to students, and it's kind of an engaging way for them to think. Again, they can share their 2 truths and a lie. Again, you have to be cautious to make sure they understand that they want to share something that they want to share. That seems obvious to us probably, but some of them sometimes go down rabbit holes. So it's sometimes good for you to preview those 2 truths and a lie to make sure we're not going to go down a path you don't want to. But I think it's a fun way to get things started. And instead of an introduction where students are kind of like, you know, I don't know what to say. And then we get into everybody has a dog. These kinds of things allow for a little more creativity. Of course, there's tons of things in platforms that can help you. Polls, having a whiteboard, using breakout rooms. Sometimes we might talk about the question we're going to talk about next time. I love polls because one of the things that I center around is undergraduate research. And I like them to be able to think about what is good research and what is bad research. And I think that's appropriate in any one of our topic areas. So as a result, I may tell them I'm going to take a poll on what their favorite drink is, and I might actually just give them 3 choices, and it frustrates them. So I might say Coke products, Pepsi products, or Gatorade, and I make them choose, and a lot of them are like, wait a minute, I want another choice. And that's what I'm trying to show them about research, is we have to be careful how we frame and couch research. And that's a whole nother presentation, hour-long presentation on introductory classes and undergraduate research. But I think these areas allow for critical thinking skills. And again, you're familiar probably with them if you teach in any one of the online platforms. I talked about discussion board races. I use them all the time. So students have to make sure that, that whatever they're posting, whether it be, for example, I have them go out either in the library format or in Google Scholar and get an abstract that it might be appropriate for a later project. And again, it's a race. So they post an abstract. No one else can post an abstract in that area of interest. Again, makes them post quicker and makes them read posts, which are the two things I think that are the biggest problems along the way. I also have reactions to that. And again, I'm very careful to make sure that our reactions are set as critical thinking questions. So not just, oh, great post, Sally, I agree. I ask them to make sure that they are going to say something of value. So sometimes I have critical questions that I might ask that they need to answer about one of their peers' posts on the discussion board. Again, I think I'm going to try this next semester with videos instead of posting discussion board email type format. I'm going to have them post more TikTok-y type videos to talk about things. I always have a leader of the day. Kelsey and I were talking about this before we started. The chat distracts me. A lot of times I get off topic when I'm looking at the chat. So I ask a student to monitor the chat for me every time. The leader of the day can also tell me things like, your video doesn't have any sound, or I can't see that, what's up? And really, they kind of like to be the leader of the day. And of course, most of them are more technologically sound than I am. So it's very helpful in that manner. You know, one of the problems that I have with videos is I can't tell if they're seeing, hearing, and getting it. So it's also helpful. I also use captioning. We have several students who have challenges that need captioning. And so as a result, I make sure that the leader of the day tells me what that is. Now, how you select the leader of the day, maybe some of the formats that we're going to talk about later would be a good way to do that. Or you can just go down the roll sheet. It doesn't really matter. I think it's helpful. I do scavenger hunts. One of the things that I've noticed when I was home at COVID, I watched Ellen a lot. And of course, Ellen was online as well too. And she had scavenger hunts for celebrities. And so I used them to kind of engage people. And you can have them do this related to your topic area. So if you're teaching history, you might have them go find an item that was made in a particular country, or something from a particular country if they're travelers. Or maybe, you know, assuming that some of them aren't travelers, something that relates to something local, a local find. I have a lot of my students either bring their children, their babies, or their pets. And so as a result, I oftentimes have the hat one because everybody has a hat. It's a good way to start. I also do mac and cheese. Now, some people don't like this. I have students who aren't crazy about it, and I have students that absolutely love it. And that's why I think you have to sparkle it through the semester. If you have this every time, then people kind of begin to dread it. But as a result, I probably use it about once a quarter tops. Pets is kind of a silly one to do because most of them bring their pets anyway, or show their pets at some point in time. Children occur here too. As an aside, I'll tell you that sometimes faculty are frustrated when students are in their beds or not dressed. I don't mind that at all. I think perhaps learning takes place better when we're comfortable and in a safe place. And so as a result, I do not require people to do that. Now, I've given this presentation where a speech teacher told me that's not okay, and I get that. I think if you're teaching speech, you probably need to teach them proper protocol to speak. And perhaps if you're having a presentation that day, you might require them to get dressed and get up. But I find this funny because a lot of times in our faculty and services, there are faculty in their beds. So whatever. I also had a student who painted every class period. She had an easel and she was painting. And of course, if I had time to gather great data, I would love to know if she wasn't a better student because she was painting than if she was sitting there without any interaction whatsoever. Of course, now you can take virtual field trips, or you could require students, if you're teaching history or even math or whatever, to create a virtual field trip. So perhaps as I get more comfortable with these video formats, we might have the students tape a video of something that relates to our class. In psychology, I love to do that because I'll say, you know, one of my assignments is post a picture of something in your life that is psychology. And of course, in the end, the lesson that is had is everything in life is psychology. So we relate those things. Again, anything you can do to have them invest and bring something to class, the better off they are. Now, I've never had Barack Obama in my class. Maybe this is setting the bar a little high. But again, in abnormal psych, for example, in the live class I used to teach, we would visit a total institution mental health facility. And nowadays it's very hard to do that for safety and confidentiality and liability. So it might well be that some of those kinds of things could happen. You could go places that you would never be able to go in your classroom setting. I do attendance. This is if there's one thing that you may or may not agree with, it's this one. A lot of us who've been in the field a long time are big into thinking attendance is very important. Obviously, it's very important in the financial aid world. So we definitely, at least in my institutions, need to gather data on attendance. But I don't give points for it at all. Blackboard has a nice function. I know all the platforms do to allow you to take attendance. So I open it and they check in. I don't even remind them sometimes that attendance is there. But hopefully they're paying attention to attendance. It's definitely something that I do gather. I open it at random times, sometimes in the middle of the class, sometimes at the end of class. But again, my goal is to help them. So I will tell them, you know, attendance is a very important correlate to your grade. People who attend class the most have a tendency to do best in my class, but I just really don't want to, as a division director in the old days, attendance was one of those grade appeal problems, because what is attendance? And again, if they can pass my class and not attend, I don't say that, but it's not my goal. I'm not one that takes seat time into the phenomenon. This is Zoom bingo. Again, I'd probably do this at the very beginning of class, but you can not only do Zoom bingo, this happens to be about Zoom, but about anything. So if you have something that you want to do, I live in Oklahoma. We have a lot of tornadoes and bad weather here. And there's a weatherman in Oklahoma City that has all these little catchphrasey things he says. So it turns out there's weather bingo. There probably is Dr. Garrett bingo, because I have mannerisms and statements and things to say that I do over and over and over again. I have a question I always ask about the 3 C's, you know, questions, comments, and concerns. And of course, one of them's a Q, and I make fun of that. So you could probably have Dr. Garrett bingo later in the semester, just to see who uses my mannerisms and my sayings the most. You know, I do too much of Bueller. I do that too. So that's probably a good bingo score for me. You could have the students send them in and then create your bingo cards. And again, maybe that's on test review day. We also might have a psychology bingo. So I might use terms or phrases in bingo to go that route. Again, this is a great live one too, right? This doesn't have to be on Zoom whatsoever. If there's one criticism that I get in student evaluations live, it's that I'm not very good with names. One neat thing that happened after COVID, because we had to have a seating chart to make sure, you know, who was sitting near whom when COVID would hit my classroom. And I love a seating chart just because I could get their names down. But that's the best thing about Zoom, right? Is everybody's got their name right there. So I use it, I refer to them. My students know if their camera isn't on, then I'm probably going to call on them first when it comes to a question. I don't really point that out. I just do it quietly, and a lot of times students will notice now and turn their cameras on. But knowing their names is, again, a no duh, but it is very helpful in the process of making sure that we're personal in how that goes. And sometimes I'll say something about, I've got a question for Lindsay's ceiling fan. because that's all I'm seeing. And so as a result, I just kind of in a joking way, make sure that they know that I know that they're not in the camera view. Now, I also think we have to be careful to make sure some people need to not be on camera. Again, we have a lot of people who have suffered classroom trauma in one capacity or another, and may not have the capacity to be on camera. I have a student that is on the autism spectrum, and he surprisingly, there's just special things that happen as a result of that. So we have to be careful about those things. And usually in the chat, they'll tell me what's up and why they're not on camera today. By the way, if they're not on camera all the time, then I make a deal of that. And I give everybody some grace if they don't want to be on camera once or twice. This is the wheel of names. I love it. I don't know if you all have used it, but you can put your classroom roster into the wheel of names and then click to spin it, and it will spin to select. This is a good way to pick the leader of the day. It's also a good way to ask questions. Again, I use the wheel of names in live classes too, when we're talking about review, because that way it's a random way to do this. I tend to, if I'm live, use a group instead of a name. So I'm going to put all my students in 4 groups. I'm going to send them off to talk about the test for a while, and then we play a trivia game. And I would have team 1, team 2 to click to spin to think who's first or last. I try very hard not to embarrass or put people on the spot. You know, higher ed is traumatizing to some people. They're very nervous about those kinds of things. So I try to minimize the trauma, but you know, I'm a psychologist, so that's one of the things I like to do is make people feel comfortable. Here's trivia night, trivia day. Again, I have really good luck with this on test reviews. I put people in groups. The first time I do this, I give points to the extra credit points to the students that win, and I give extra credit points to the students that lose. So I might have 6 groups, and I joke that I'm giving them to the ones with the lowest point structure because they need it. I won't do that ever again, right? Because once you've showed your cards on that, it's an incentive to not do well in trivia night, but it's up to you. There are lots of packages out there to do this. I don't know if anybody has a favorite template. Family Feud is another one where you could talk about research projects or research information and go from there. And sometimes I use trivia night instead of a small group project. You know, we know the pros and cons of groups and grades. Sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. So I don't like to put too much structure, too much value on trivia night for groups because, but it does, I think, at least allow them to come prepared, or if they aren't prepared, to incentivize them to think about what are the structures and things on the test. You know about student presentations. Again, I'm looking for platforms. There is at least one out there, but probably several, that allows students to present in more of a TikTok fashion. The problem with this, and one of my areas of interest, is generational barriers, intergenerational conflict in classes. And this definitely happens sometimes with my traditional students, traditional college age students versus adults returning to school. They may not be happy with the TikTok format. So I haven't decided next semester when I install this or instigate it, if I'm going to offer them PowerPoint versus a TikTok video, or how I'm going to go at that to allow students who aren't comfortable there. A good example of this is I have a class that uses brochures. So they have to create a brochure within some kind of platform. And some of my students are very adept at it. And some of my students turn it in a Word format that's really not great. And of course, I think as instructors, we have to say, what is the value? What is the learning objective? Is the learning objective that you can make a beautiful brochure, or is the learning objective that you understand concise information and how to reference? And the latter is mine. So I don't necessarily always get completely beautiful brochures from everyone, and I'm cool with that. But I'm trying to develop new ways other than, especially in Zoom classes, how to present. But I think you all know better than any that presenting in class is sometimes a huge issue with students. And again, we want them to learn to do that. So I think presentations are important, but also I'm not a speech class. So as a result, I'm pretty generous with the nervousness and presentations that go forward. And the last one is going ahead and using community resources, kind of related to that one I talked about. Our own institution has a wonderful presentation on first aid for mental health. I offered that as an extra credit opportunity. I am actually a community educator for the Alzheimer's Association of Oklahoma. So next week, I'm doing a presentation on warning signs of dementia, and I'm giving that over Zoom to the community, but my students are allowed to participate for extra credit. I always do extra credit on that just because, you know, it's not during a traditional class period. And also it's kind of a outside source. So I love it when we have large community meetings like that where students can interact with people that are not in our class. Sorry, let me grab a drink real quick. My institution does Sex 101. It's perfect for a psychology class or any kind of human relations type class. I allowed them to attend that. Again, it's extra credit just because a lot of times the time frame doesn't work for all students. Here in Tulsa, we have information and lots of really engaging stuff around the Tulsa race massacre. And again, that fits in psychology really wonderfully. So we can Zoom about that. We could actually take a virtual trip down to Greenwood and see the museum. Again, going to places, field trips are really difficult in live classes, much less in Zoom classes. And Tulsa Community College has a book of the semester every semester. And so as a result, we can integrate that into our setting. We typically have a speaker, around that topic. And so again, it's a good way for students to become engaged with that. Now, you might say to yourself, how do you prove attendance here? And the answer for me depends. Since I'm teaching the class on dementia, I'll know if the students are engaged. I try not to attend the sex education presentation because I want students to be comfortable in asking questions. So again, nicely on Zoom, I know that they got there in time and that they participated all the way through. The presenter can give me that information. But again, presenting or participating is always so subjective. I just really like to know that they were there. And if you ask me, well, how do I know that they paid attention? I don't know if they pay attention in live presentations either. So that's why I kind of am pretty loose on that. But I also know most of the things I assign are pretty hard not to pay attention to. They're pretty engaging stuff. This is something you can Google up and think about, whipping or popcorn share. I like popcorn, the word better, but sometimes the reason I used it here is so that you can tell it's out there. This is really big in participation. And again, you can use this in a live classroom just as easily as you can in a Zoom classroom. And it goes things like, you know, bring 2 questions about this chapter that you thought about when you were reading it, or where was sticky? What was sticky for you? What did you really not understand? So an example for me is in the learning chapter, we present lots of information about classical conditioning versus operant conditioning. And that tells us a lot about what are the differences. So that might be a real sticky situation that a student would bring. And again, I've seen this done live where they bring a 3x5 card and they don't put their name on it, but it's got the sticky situation or the 2 test questions or the muddiest part. Some people in my community like think, pair, share. You've probably heard of that too. Again, a good group activity for Zoom is to have them get together to think separately about an issue, whatever it is. So I might say, I want you to think of a practical application for classical conditioning and bring it to class next time. Then I throw them in groups and I say, first present your thought, then pair up and present your thought, and then share it back to the class when you come back together. Did you notice I went past 15? It's because I can't help it. There's so many cool things. That idea is one that you can use anywhere for sure. This is just a little information about what I've found, how the students like or dislike the things that I presented to you. And again, just to let you know what's up there. And I add things every semester to this. There's no question that my classes get engaged pretty quickly. And one of the things I'll tell you that is huge for me and is what I call the show after the show. That's another kind of Ellen or popular media item, but I always have a show after the show in my classes. So students, usually the engaged A students, right, stay, but sometimes people have a question that they're not comfortable talking about. So I end the class period and excuse, so to speak, anybody who's attending in there that's done. And then we go into the show after the show. So I answer questions or we have engaging conversations. You know, sometimes if you have somebody that overshares, especially in a Zoom setting, you could say, hey, I'm out of time, or I got to get back to the topic. So come to the show after the show and we'll talk about that. It's a nice way to stop that person who incessantly talks, but also gives them a platform to allow them to get that information that they need. You know, I never want to squelch enthusiasm in any class. So that's what I call it. And I have back-to-back classes on Zoom. So my 9:30, I have about 20 minutes before my 11 starts. And so the show after the show works perfectly for that. I just leave Zoom open. I don't admit the 11 o'clock students in until 11. Interestingly, something bizarre happened that makes a huge difference. And that is I had a student who wanted to do office hours in the time frame of the show after the show. So I invited that student to that. And I asked permission. I said, do you mind? Because we're talking about the very topic you have questions. And so as a result, in a surreptitious way, I had a student come into office hours and my top-notch students were in the show after the show. And so we had a discussion about his question as if he had a class to talk about it. Now, again, I need permission to do that, but this is a total online student. So he doesn't ever have the interaction that my online live class did. So I brought him to my online live class. It was incredible. It worked really well. And my students got to do the interacting more so than me. They got to talk about what works for them, what doesn't work for them. It was so cool. Again, do they like it? Do they not? Now, again, this isn't really a good, these are very casual, non-researchy questions. But you can see what happens here. Students self-select Zoom for the most part, I think, because maybe they do have a baby in their lap, or maybe gas is a big problem for them, purchasing gas for a car, or maybe their car, or they got a job that they've got to get to in a particular amount of time. These are our students who are most at risk. Also, they may be traumatized by a classroom, and we have to make sure we understand that. Because some of these students, especially in my community college setting, are very intimidated by higher education. And being in their bed or in their living room or with their dog beside them or holding their baby makes a huge amount of difference in their lives. I had a student 2 semesters ago that actually Zoomed on campus. So they were in a break roomy kind of area that had a circular, and I had a fan club come. So that student brought 2 other students with them who had a break in between, and they attended my class, even though they weren't students in my class. Now we have to be careful with confidentiality and all that kind of stuff. And, I don't want a huge distraction, but it worked well in that class period for sure. And I always tell my students, this is not a confidential setting, because anybody can be taping this, anybody can be watching this. I mean, even though I obviously control who's in the session, they could have a friend next to them. So we're very careful about that. These are the people who want to Zoom in the future. Again, this is a niche. Not everybody likes it, and most of our faculty don't like it. And if you don't like it, it's going to come across. But you can tell I love the engagement of this, and I embrace the freedom it gives me too, which is a major thing. Again, maybe I may have more enthusiasm for it than than other faculty do. So I get pretty good ratings on how my Zoom classes go, predominantly because I've taken it, embraced it, made it mine, engaged it up, so to speak, really rock it, hopefully. That's my goal. These are just comments that were made out there that whether they liked it or not. And again, I don't know, Kelsey, how you want to do this. I'm happy to share the PowerPoints with people who might be interested in taking more time with this. Again, they like the involvement for the most part. I would not be one of those students who's crazy about scavenger hunts if I were in my class, but people love that for the most part. But then you can see how sometimes being in my bed is not a great thing because it makes them sleepy or tired. But most of them really, really liked the setting that we had and the involvement. Isn't it interesting that the scavenger hunts are big? I find that to be really intriguing. These are some resources that I've used in gathering data. Again, we're going to know more and more about how effective this is, but it's like everything else we do in the higher education format is, you know, is my Zoom class the same as someone else's Zoom class, especially maybe an adjunct. Hey, I was an adjunct, I'm not dogging that, but has very little resources and very little time, or a traditional college faculty member who might be asked to do this that doesn't want to. That's true of everything, right? Every format we have, how involved and engaged a faculty member is probably has a lot to do with how involved and engaged learners are. And one thing I'll say that's really important is sometimes you get these chemistry classes, right? And I don't mean chemistry, I mean the chemistry of the class may make a huge difference. It's that whole thing about, you know, sometimes all classes I teach give me pleasure, some of them during the teaching and some of them when they're no longer on my roster. So sometimes you just get a chemistry that's not great. And oftentimes, and luckily for me, the classes I've had on Zoom have a great chemistry attached to them. And once a few people start going and seeing it's safe, then they have a tendency to create this class that's really good and shares very well. Kelsey, y'all asked me to leave time for questions, and I think I've kind of hit that 15-minute mark. So I'm very welcoming to answering any questions that are out there.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So we're just going to give a few minutes for attendees to ask questions, and we'll go from there. All right, we do have one that came in. How do you ensure that students are getting the feedback they need to be successful in your classes?
Well, I do a lot of answering of questions. So, I open that to what format they want that. I'm also one of those graders who, especially when it comes to my research project that I walk them through, the undergraduate research piece, I give them lots of chances. So when they're writing their own mock abstract, I may see 3 iterations of that. I'm very comfortable with also, for example, we're at the end of the semester and I have a big project that's due at the end, a mock research project. I offer students the opportunity to turn that in a week early and get a almost guaranteed great grade if they're ready, if I can critique it in class. And of course, I'm gentle with that, but that way they can see me walk through what I'm looking for right before they do the project. And of course, the students that do that are my A students, right? They're the ones that do it anyway. So here we have a great example of a project that was created in class. Here's what it looks like. Here's some of the things I would change. And then we go from there. Again, I do a lot of meeting with students on Zoom. I don't know about you all, but office hours have never worked for me. I have very few students that ever use them. And the students that use them are the students that don't need to use them. So in this kind of format, it's really easy for me to pop on and talk to them and then pop off. And I will forever try to do my office hours in a group setting next time. You know, some of you've done that with discussion boards. I know back in the day when we didn't have as much of an avenue for video, my students would never really kind of come in and work on those projects. But nowadays, instead of posting on the discussion boards comments, I can give them live comments that are out there. So hopefully whatever freedom they have, I don't have posted office hours in Zoom. I know some of you do. So you say, I'm going to be here at tonight from 7 to 8. I don't find that to be very popular. What I do find to be popular is, when can you meet? And of course, I only have to put on professional clothes from the top up. So here I am in my kitchen, and it might be 7 p.m. It might be 8:30 a.m. That way I can give them personal interaction. If they don't like that, then I do a lot of commenting on the discussion boards. What the questioner want to weigh in a little more on that? Did I get that answered for you?
I think that was a great answer.
I think the key is to be approachable, right? And again, sometimes they won't ask for help anyway. We also have a great software system in Tulsa Community College, and I'm not here to promote it, so I won't name it, but it is definitely has points of touch throughout the entire semester. So I can quite easily tell not only the counselor, but the student, this student's not attending class, or this student hasn't taken the last test. And it's such a nice package in that it's easy to use. So we do a lot of contact with students across the semester. Do you find that students are engaging with each other more? Yeah, especially I think online, because again of the safety zone. And I know people say this all the time. They say being online is not, I don't know my students. Well, I do. The baby cries or the doorbell rings, or so I actually know my Zoom students better than I know my live students, because this atmosphere is so safe for them, so much safer. So yes, I think if we're engaging on Zoom, they can be engaging on Zoom. But if you hate the format and you're not willing to put yourself out there, my jokes are corny, but I tell them in live classes too. But the idea that we have an opportunity to use their safety zone as a place to come and teach is awesome. I love that. I had a couple of students who exchanged emails. Of course, it's easy to exchange emails in Tulsa because of if you know the formatting, you're probably going to catch a student. But they do Zooms separately from me. And I actually had an Alzheimer's event on campus that I offered for students to come. And I had 5 of those students show up at my Alzheimer's event. And that's so cool, right? And then last class period, I had a student ask me if I was at a piano bar on Friday night. I love a good piano bar. And I was. So a couple of students have interacted with me live just based on that. So it's a great format for that. Just be careful what you do at the piano bar.
Well, thank you, Laura. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to put those into the Q&A now. While we're waiting, if you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposals to the Learning and Growing website, which I'm going to throw in the chat now. I am not seeing any more Q&A questions right now. To let everybody know, we will be emailing you a link with the recording of this webinar once it's available. And if we don't have any more questions, then we can wrap this up. I really appreciate it, Laura. That was an awesome presentation. And yeah, awesome. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Oh, and for the presentation slides, if you would like to make those available, I can put those on the website as well. We can do it. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Thank you so much.